Welcome back to Homesteading with the Zimmermans, where we work hard and play hard on our little corner of land in Iowa. My husband and I were born and raised Old Order Mennonite, or horse and buggy Mennonite, as some refer to them as. And although we are no longer part of that culture or community, we are intentional about passing on the old-fashioned skills of our childhood to the next generation. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Homesteading with the Zimmermans, Christmas edition. So last week you watched us make all the Christmas cookies, and every year there is one tradition that I started years ago that I would kind of like to drop, but the children, they don't actually demand it, but when it always comes down to like the last week before Christmas, and then they're like, oh, what kind of candy are you gonna make this year for Christmas, Mom? And I'm always like, well, I was kind of hoping that you guys would forget about the candies. But they don't, and it's okay. The only reason I drag my feet a little bit is because I have to buy so many processed foods to make their favorite candies, but it's okay. There is no eternal value in the foods that we eat, and we eat a very clean diet most of the year, and I will happily make them some candy for Christmas because I don't make candy any other time of year. So in today's video, I'm going to be showing you our favorite candies that we make. And I kind of, some years I make one kind and the next year I make the other kind, but there's one kind that I make every single year that is a family favorite. So I'm gonna, and it's pretty involved. It's the chocolate caramel candy, but I'm also making cheese today, and our oldest daughter's coming over to help. My plan is to have the candies done, and I also want to make some eggnog, and then have that all ready for the kids when they come home from school. Is some candy and eggnog, and because ultimately it's really about the memories and the traditions. It's about the birth of Christ, right? But the memories that we store are what helps us want to recreate that. The memories that my children have surrounding Christmas and the holidays are what they are going to want to recreate for their families. And it just creates this whole season of worship where our hearts are drawn towards the baby in the manger. And so doing something special for my family, making them something that I normally wouldn't make for them, just like with the cookies, and then being purposeful about what memories I store about the day, that's what's going to help me want to recreate it next year. So, for example, making candy is kind of a mess. I'm a messy cook to start with, right? I'm just a mess in the kitchen. You've all seen it. So I already know that it's going to be work and mess. I know that. Like, I remember that. But giving myself the room to store the positive memories is what my point is. So imagining how happy they're going to be when they come home from school to see the candy and how much, like, the smiles on their faces, that's what I'm going to intentionally remember, because I want to override the painful memories of the mess and the cleanup. And in that way, every year when it comes time to do some of their favorite traditions, I will be motivated by the positive memories that I intentionally stored to override the memories of the mess and the chaos and the cleanup that I needed to do in the kitchen. So the first thing we're going to do, so I have all of these, this is like 50, 60, I think it was $56 worth of groceries that I wouldn't normally buy just to make this candy. But I'm gonna override that memory, that feeling of, oh my goodness, I bought all this junk food. I bought all this void of nutrition food. And I'm going to create food. And it's not a pride thing. I mean, maybe it is. Maybe I have too much pride to do this. But look, this is me showing you that I really don't have too much pride, to show you that I'm not legalistic about what my family eats. I'm intentional about what my family eats, but more than that, I'm intentional about the memories that we make. So I'm not going to talk again about these $56 worth of junk food that I bought to make my children some happy Christmas memories. Last night, Elvin said he had to go to town, and I said, well, I'll ride with you and get the supplies that I need, because I last minute decided that that I am going to make some candy for them. So I'm hoping that I remember to get everything for our favorite candies. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start melting down my almond bark in the crock pot. And we're simply going to use this almond bark to coat some of our candy, like to dip some of our candy in. And I'm gonna get that started on low. And the thing with almond bark, or any time that you want to dip something in chocolate and you want it to come out nice and smooth, is you cannot make it too hot. If you make it too hot, it gets textured. And the other thing is, if any bit of water comes into your chocolate, I know the Pennsylvania Dutch word for it, it's all gruselig, which means like unruly or messy. But it just gets clumpy and textured, and it won't coat your chocolate nice and smooth. So we're just going to keep this on low and let it melt. And we're going to cover it so that I don't splash any water into it or anything, because, I'm messy that way. All right, guys, the cheese is in the cheese press, and I am going to get started with the candy. So one of the best tips if you're going to coat candy in chocolate is to freeze your candy so it doesn't get soft when you're dipping it into the hot chocolate. So I'm going to get these peanut butter Buckeyes, or our version of the peanut butter Buckeyes, ready and in the freezer so that we can be ready to dip them in chocolate. So I need 1 cup of creamy peanut butter. So it's going to be one of those days where I cannot get discouraged about the state of my kitchen until I'm all done, because I will clean it up when I'm all done. But when you've got a lot going on at one time, it's just going to be messy. So because I don't have a double boiler, we're just going to put this measuring cup inside of a pot of boiling water, and we're going to melt the butter and peanut butter together. Once that's almost all melted together, I'm going to add my pinch of salt and my splash of vanilla to it. So next, I'm going to add my 2.5 cups of Rice Krispie cereal. And then you need 1 cup of powdered sugar. I'm using a 1/2 cup measuring cup. So now I'm just going to pretend these are little cookies, and I'm going to dip them out here on this parchment paper. And I am not going to make a double batch of these. None of the candy I'm making a double batch of, just because. I'm not counting this as nutrition. This is just a treat. so I'm not, looking to make it last a long, long time. I'm just looking to treat the family, and then when it's gone, it's all gone. So now these peanut butter balls are going to go rest in the freezer for up to an hour. So like I mentioned earlier, I'm also making cheese today. I'm making a 5-pound wheel of red pepper Gouda, and it has rested here in the press for about 30 minutes, so it's time to flip this cheese. Hi, what you doing? What you doing? Are you ornery? All right, friends, I am going to start on the family's favorite Christmas candy. They don't really care what other kinds I make as long as I make this kind. This is kind of a staple. And of course, it is the most involved candy to make as well. It has 4 layers. But don't worry, they're real simple layers. The first layer is 1 1/4 cup of milk chocolate chips and 1/4 a cup of creamy peanut butter. And we're going to melt that together. So the original recipe called for 1 cup of milk chocolate chips and 1/4 a cup of butterscotch chips. But I no longer buy the butterscotch chips. I just use 1 1/4 cups of milk chocolate chips and melt that together with my peanut butter. So then as soon as all your chocolate chips are melted smooth, you're going to pour that into the bottom of a 9 by 13 pan. I like to layer mine with parchment paper, but you definitely don't have to. It'll just make it easier to remove the candy. All right, we've got that first layer on. So now we're just gonna refrigerate this and let this set up. And in the meantime, we're gonna start working on our second layer. For this layer, we're gonna start with 1/4 a cup of butter. So as soon as that butter's melted, we're gonna add 1/4 a cup of milk and 1 cup of granulated sugar. And we're gonna bring this back to a simmer and let it simmer for about 5 minutes. Just enough to get the sugar completely dissolved. So once it has simmered for about 5 minutes, you're gonna add 1/4 a cup of peanut butter. Forget to turn your heat off. So we're going to slide it over off of the heat. And then we're gonna put 1 small container of marshmallow cream into this mixture. And I know how bad this stuff is for you. It's the very stuff that I preach against. But for the sake of Christmas, we're going to make the family a treat. So you're going to stir that until it's all smooth. And then you're going to add 1 1/2 cups of chopped peanuts. I like to add salted peanuts just because I'm a big fan of salt and salty and sweet together. So I add a little bit of, I always make sure my peanuts are salted peanuts. So I ended up putting my chocolate layer in the freezer because it wasn't hardening fast enough. And my nugget layer was ready. So I'm just gonna layer this on top. So like I said, I'm not counting this as nutrition for the family. This is simply for pleasure, just a treat. So I'm gonna pop this into the refrigerator. I'll actually probably put it in the freezer just to make sure this gets nice and solid before I add my next layer. So the next layer, as you can tell, is a caramel layer. So as I'm cooking and baking with all these junk ingredients today, I came across a couple brands that I've seen mentioned in a lot on social media and even in news lately. And it's a real strange feeling for me to see America, the rest of America, now concerned about, red food dyes and preservatives and things that are in popular foods, right? Because 20 years ago, when it was us, like when the doctor told us that our daughter's tonsils would need to come out, and like I got super concerned, and I'm like, wait, God didn't make us with any spare parts. Why would a 3-year-old child's organs not be working? So that's what sent me on this whole journey of, nutrition and learning about toxins that are in everyday foods that we were, consuming. And so what I learned was red food dyes, all food dyes, artificial flavors, and a lot of preservatives were actually toxic. And her tonsils were overworked from trying to filter out the toxins. So we just eliminated all of that stuff from our diets, the best that we could, little bits at a time. And I started reading nutritional labels, and like we were really odd. Like we were seen as conspiracy theorists and like weird, because we, when we go places, we were like, oh, I'm sorry, she can't have gummy bears, or she can't have Kool-Aid, things like that, especially during the first couple years when we were doing like a deep detox of toxins. As time went on and we were eating healthier overall, she could get away with a glass of Kool-Aid and it wouldn't cause her to be sick, or it wouldn't set her back as much. But we had a really hard time getting people to understand why. So we just stopped talking about it, right? One of the more hurtful things that I remember people saying to us was that we were just making excuses for our children's behavior instead of disciplining them. And that was very hurtful, and it, ruined relationships, because in my experience, I knew that children that feel well act well. And I, to this day, firmly believe that if we didn't watch, the food dyes and artificial flavors, and there's dozens and dozens of harmful ingredients like this, if we weren't conscious about keeping those from our daily diet, we would have 2, if not more, of our children diagnosed with something and probably medicated for behavioral or learning issues. We just did our own thing and stopped talking about it because, we were seen as cruel for not allowing her to have, certain things. And then as more children were added to the family, we continued. But anyway, that's kind of a little backstory. But it feels really validating to have the rest of America now suddenly catch on and be talking about how bad food dyes are. And it just feels really validating to me, that's all. But so all this noise that Americans are making, demanding, the same quality ingredients in our cereals in America as are in Europe, I think it is. No artificial colors and flavors. As excited as I am to have more people along for the ride, I feel like we're missing something. Like, cereal really isn't that healthy. Even if you remove the red food dyes and, all the food dyes, it still isn't nutrition. I feel like we need to be putting all of our efforts that we're putting into making all this noise about food dyes out of our kids' cereal. I think we need to be putting that effort into educating people what nutrition really is, because cereal doesn't really count. Anyway, those are my thoughts as I sit here unwrapping caramels for making my family some treats. But you know that I always say there's no eternal value in healthy food. So I'm gonna make my family some Christmas treats, and we're gonna make good memories. And then you know what? We're gonna move on, and come January, we're gonna be eating almost 100% from our pantry and our larder, and we're not going to have any guilt about the junk that we ate, because pleasure in eating something, like eating junk, in a joyful, functional atmosphere is still healthier for a child than eating only healthy foods in an abusive or stressful atmosphere. So it's really, it's a heart. It is the heart of our children and the heart of our families that we want to focus on, more than the nutrition, even though I'm very passionate about the nutrition. Anyway, I'm rambling now. But I now remember why this is usually a job I give to the children, because I don't barely have the patience for this. Oh my goodness! You know, I wonder how it would work to try the, like my homemade caramel sauce. I wonder how it would work to try that in this candy. But then again, you know, the question is, do I want to waste that good quality caramel sauce that's been made from whey? Do I want to waste that healthy caramel in this candy that really doesn't have a whole lot of nutritional value otherwise? That's the question. All right, so now that I've crossed that hurdle, I'm going to go melt these all down. So to the caramels, I'm going to add 1/4 a cup of heavy whipping cream. You want to make sure to melt your caramels on low. Do not get impatient and turn it up, because it scorches very quickly. So then you're just going to pour that caramel mixture, or those melted caramels, right on top of your marshmallow cream mixture. And you're going to spread that out and put it back into the refrigerator or the freezer. It just depends on how impatient you are to make the next layer. And then your very last layer is just a repeat of the first layer. So it's your chocolate chips and peanut butter melted together and spread out on top of the caramel layer. And then this time I'm just gonna let it set in the refrigerator, because the next step is to cut these into small squares. So now we're going to make our chocolate caramel candies, or pecan candies as we call them. We start with a pretzel and we top them with a Rolo candy. I normally like to use the milk chocolate Rolos, but I accidentally got the dark chocolate Rolos. But that's okay. We're just going to proceed like normal. So after you have each pretzel topped, we're going to put them in a 250-degree oven, and then don't walk away. You're going to want to stick close, and you're going to want to remove them after about 2 to 5 minutes. Whenever you can tell that the caramel in the Rolo is softened. So while your Rolos are still soft and warm, you're going to top them each with a half pecan. It works best if you purchase pecan halves, but we had pounds and pounds of pecan pieces gifted to us, so we are just topping each piece with pecan pieces. So after my peanut butter balls have chilled I am just going to drop them one by one into my melted chocolate, and then I'm going to let them dry on parchment paper. So one of the reasons I prefer to use almond bark over chocolate chips for coating or for candy chocolate is because almond bark has some additives that help it to dry harder, and it's just not as messy. Grandma used to just use chocolate chips and add a little bit of paraffin wax to it to help them dry a little harder, but I just like to use the almond bark. So one of the other things that we like to coat in chocolate is we take Ritz crackers and we put some marshmallow cream and some peanut butter on inside of them, and then we coat those in chocolate as well. Some years I've just cheated and bought the mini Ritz bits with peanut butter in, and tossed those in some coating chocolate and coated those. But this year I decided to make the bigger ones. So after coating those two candies, I still have some chocolate left in the bottom of my crock pot, so I'm going to take some of these pretzels and coat those. So I still have chocolate left, and I also have about half a can of peanuts left from the other candy, so I'm just going to dump those peanuts in the chocolate and make some chocolate coated peanuts as well. My grandma used to use up the last bits of her chocolate like this with peanuts, and she would also do some with raisins. But I'm not doing raisins because nobody but me will eat the chocolate coated raisins, because I don't think any members of my family likes raisins. So then when I've cleaned up all the chocolate in the crock pot with the peanuts, I am going to sprinkle the peanuts with some coarse salt. So while all the chocolate firms up and dries and hardens, Winston and I are going to clean up the kitchen a little bit before the children come home from school. And it warms my heart to have Winston sit up here and watch and observe me in the kitchen. And he's sitting in the exact spot that his mother used to sit to watch me, and our other 6 children as well. So now that we've got the kitchen tidied again, Winston and I are going to make the eggnog. And I need 4 eggs. I am going to link last year's video, or maybe it was 2 years ago, where I share a couple different eggnog recipes, especially for those of you that don't want to consume raw eggs. But my recipe gets 4 raw eggs, 1/4 a cup of sugar, and 1/4 a cup of maple syrup, or you can use all maple syrup, or you could even use some honey. And then I add a tablespoon of lemon juice, and I beat all of the eggs together. And you can see that I cannot find the lid to my blender because I have little boys putting dishes away, and they don't always put them in the same places. So instead of spending, the next 30 minutes searching for it, I just improvised. And I need 4 cups of milk. Sorry, Winston.
You scared him?
Sorry.
Oh, it's sprayed?
It's sprayed. Because I can't find my lid. I'm sorry. Now we're both messy. Now we're both messy, I guess.
That's so funny.
And then I'm going to add my nutmeg. I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of nutmeg. So our chocolate candy has hardened enough where I can store it in the freezer. And here again, if you put it in the freezer right after you make it, it's going to be a much better candy when you get it out, even though with so many processed ingredients in this candy, it really wouldn't go stale very fast at all. But I'm going to fill a plate just for the children, and I'm going to fill their glasses with eggnog for them.
Mom. Look at that. Thanks.
You're welcome. Is that good?
Yeah.
Just start with 2.
Mmm. Oh wait. This eggnog is good. Can I get dark chocolate? And there's caramel. And caramel on the inside.
Watch
Dark
him, Hadassah.
chocolate
He's
will-
really close to it.
Oh.
Mmm.
He likes you, and he missed you. He's probably wondering why she wasn't here.
Uh-huh. Okay, I don't have any more paper plates. That's what I was looking for.
It's like freezing rain out there.
Oh.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So then I filled a couple containers full of candy for our married children, and I put the rest of the candies, a variety of each kind, into 2 freezer containers, and I will save one to take along to any invitations that we might get where, you know, they say bring something to share, and the other one I will save and we'll bring it out on Christmas Day as a treat to go with our charcuterie board that we have on Christmas Day. So the very last thing I'm going to show you in today's video is one of my favorite things to do, especially on those cold and overcast winter days like we've been having the last couple days. And that is making a simmering pot. So when the furnace runs all night long, we usually wake up to a very, very dry air in the house. And that dry air does really irritate everybody's airways. So I always like to start a simmering pot on the stove, and what this does, it just puts humidity into the air and makes it much more comfortable. So I usually use my cast iron pot just because it takes less energy to keep a cast iron pot hot, because the cast iron stays hot longer. And then I'll take any citrus peels that we've saved up from breakfast or just from snacking throughout the day. I'll add a couple cinnamon sticks. And you can add any or none of these ingredients and still have it benefit the air in your home. I like to add some whole cloves, and over Christmas time, I really like to take off some pieces on the back side of our Christmas tree. It just adds a fresh pine scent when it starts simmering. And you can even add some cranberries if you want. But like I said, you can add, sometimes I simply make it with a cinnamon stick or even just some citrus peels. But for the sake of showing you, I added everything, all the options to my simmering pot this morning.